The Lord of the Rings. Book 1. Chapter 11. A Knife in the Dark. As they prepared for sleep within the motel at Bree, darkness lay on Buckland, a mist straight inside the dells and alongside the river bank. The house at Crickhollow stood silent. Fatty Bolger opened the door carefully and peered out. A feeling of worry had been developing on him all day, and he was not able to rest or go to mattress. There was a brooding chance in the breathless night air. As he stared out into the gloom, a black shadow moved under the bushes, the gate regarded to open of its personal accord and near again without a valid. Terror seized him. He shrank back, and for a second he stood trembling in the hall. Then he closed and locked the door. The night time deepened. There came the gentle sound of horses led with stealth alongside the lane. Outdoor the gate they stopped, and 3 blackguards entered, like shades of nighttime creeping throughout the floor. One went to the door, one to the corner of the house on both aspect, and there they stood, as nevertheless because the shadows of stones, whilst night went slowly on. The house and the quiet bushes appeared to be ready. Breathlessly, there was a faint stir inside the leaves, and a cock crowed a long way away. The bloodless hour before dawn became passing. The gur by means of the door moved. In the darkish without moon or stars a drawn blade gleamed, as if a sit-back mild had been unsheathed. There was a blow, gentle but heavy, and the door shuddered. Open, inside the name of Mordor, stated a voice skinny and menacing. At a second blow the door yielded and fell returned, with timbers burst and lock damaged. The blackguards passed swiftly in. At that moment, most of the trees nearby, a horn rang out. It higher. The night like re on a hill pinnacle. Wakeful. Fear. Hearth. Foes. Wide awake. Fatty Bolger had not been idle. As soon as he saw the darkish shapes creep from the garden, he knew that he ought to run for it, or perish. And run he did, out of the returned door, via the garden, and over the elds. Whilst he reached the closest residence, more than a mile away, he collapsed on the doorstep. No, no, no. He turned into crying. No, not me. I haven't got it. It become some time earlier than everybody could make out what he changed into babbling about. At final they were given the idea that enemies were in Buckland, a few strange invasion from the vintage wooded area. And then they lost no extra time. Fear. Hearth. Foes. The brandy bucks have been blowing the horn call of Buckland, that had not been sounded for 100 years, no longer because the white wolves came inside the fell wintry weather, whilst the brandy wine became frozen over. Unsleeping. Awake. Far away answering horns were heard. The alarm turned into spreading. The blackguards from the house considered one of them let fall a hobbit cloak on the step, as he ran. In the lane the noise of hoofs broke out, and amassing to a gallop, went hammering away into the darkness. All approximately Crickhollow there was the sound of horns blowing, and voices crying and toes running. But the black riders rode like a gale to the north gate. Allow the little human beings blow. Sauron could address them later. Meanwhile that they had every other errand, they knew. Now that the house changed into empty and the ring had long passed, they rode down the guards on the gate and vanished from the Shire. Within the early night time Frodo woke from deep sleep, unexpectedly, as though some sound or presence had disturbed him. He noticed that Strider become sitting alert in his chair, his eyes gleamed in the mild of the re, which were tended and was burning brightly, however he made no signal or movement. Frodo quickly went to sleep once more, however his dreams had been again stricken with the noise of wind and of galloping hoofs. The wind regarded to be curling spherical the residence and shaking it, and some distance off he heard a horn blowing wildly. He opened his eyes, and heard a cock crowing lustily inside the motel yard. Strider had drawn the curtains and pushed back the shutters with a clang. The rst grey mild of day became within the room, and a chilly air become coming via the open window. As soon as Strider had roused all of them, he led the way to their bedrooms. When they noticed them they were glad that they had taken his recommendation. The home windows had been forced open and were swinging, and the curtains were upping, the beds have been tossed about, and the bolsters slashed and hung upon the oar, the brown mat became torn to pieces. Strider immediately went to fetch the landlord. Terrible Mr. Butterbur looked sleepy and anxious. He had hardly ever closed his eyes all night time, so he stated, but he had never heard a valid. Never has the sort of issue took place in my time, he cried, raising his hands in horror. Visitors not able to sleep in their beds, and precise bolsters ruined and all. What are we coming to? Dark times, stated Strider. However, for the prevailing you may be left in peace. When you have bumped off us we will leave immediately, never mind about breakfast, a drink and a chunk standing will must do. We will be packed in a few minutes. Mr. Butterbur hurried off to peer that their ponies were given prepared, and to fetch them a chew. However, very soon he came returned in dismay. The ponies had vanished. The stable doorways had all been opened in the night, and they were long past, not handiest Mary's ponies, however every other horse and beast inside the vicinity. Frodo changed into overwhelmed via the news. How ought to they hope to reach Rivendell on foot, pursued by means of set up enemies they could as well set out for the moon. Strider sat silent for some time, searching at the hobbits, as if he become weighing up their strength and courage. Ponies might now not help us to get away, horsemen, he said at final, thoughtfully, as if he guessed what Frodo had in thoughts. We ought to not go a good deal slower, taking walks, not at the roads that I mean to take. I become going to stroll anyhow. It's far the meals and stores that trouble me. We cannot expect getting something to eat among right here and Rivendell, besides what we take with us, and we need to take plenty to spare, for we can be behind schedule, or forced to move spherical approximately, a ways out of the direct manner. How a good deal are you prepared to carry on your backs? As an awful lot as we should, said Pippin with a sinking coronary heart, however trying to reveal that he become more difficult than he seemed or felt. I will bring sufficient for two, said Sam Dentley. Can whatever be achieved, Mr. Butterbur requested Frodo. Can we get a couple of ponies within the village, or even one just for the baggage? I don't think we may want to rent them, but we might be capable to buy them, he added, doubtfully, wondering if he may want to manage to pay for it. I doubt it, said the landlord unhappily. The 2 or 3 riding ponies that there were in Bree were stabled in my backyard, and that they're long gone. As for other animals, horses or ponies for draft or what now not, there are very few of them in Bree, and they gain to be for sale. However, I'll do what I'm able to. I'll rout out Bob and ship him round as quickly as can be. Yes, stated Strider reluctantly, you had higher try this. I am afraid we will need to try to get one pony at the least, however, so ends all hope of starting early, and slipping away quietly, we would as properly have blown a horn to announce our departure. That become a part of their plan, no doubt. There may be one crumb of comfort, stated Mary, and extra than a crumb, I hope. We will have breakfast at the same time as we wait and sit down to it. Let us get maintain of knob. In the long run there has been more than 3 hours delay. Bob came back with the document that no horse or pony become to be were given for love or cash. In the neighborhood besides one, Bill Fernie had one that he would possibly likely promote. A negative vintage 1-2 starved creature its miles, stated Bob, but he received tea part with it for much less than thrice its well worth, seeing the way you're positioned, now not if I is aware of Bill Fernie. Invoice Fernie, stated Frodo. Isn't there a few trick wouldn't the beast bolt lower back to him with all our stuff, or help in tracking us, or something? I ponder, stated Strider. However, I can't consider any animal walking home to him, once it got away. I fancy that is only an afterthought. Of kind, grasped Fernie S., just a manner of increasing his prots from the affair. The chief chance is that the poor beast might be at dying's door. But there does no longer appear any preference. What does he want for it? Bill Fernie's fee was 12 silver pennies, and that turned into certainly at the least 3 instances the horse's cost in those elements. It proved to be a bony, underfed, and dispirited animal, but it did now not appear like loss of life. Simply but Mr. Butterbur paid for it himself, and supplied Mary every other 18 pence as some reimbursement for the lost animals. He turned into an sincere man, and nicely off as matters were reckoned in Bree. However, 30 silver pennies was a sore blow to him, and being cheated by Invoice Fernie made it more difficult to bear. As a count of truth he got here out on the proper side ultimately. It turned out later that only one horse have been honestly stolen. They others had been pushed off, or had bolted in terror, and have been discovered wandering in specific corners of the Breeland. Mary's ponies had escaped altogether, and eventually having a bargain of feel they made their manner to the downs in search of Fatty Lumpkin. So they got here under the care of Tom Bombadil for a while, and have been well off. However, when information of the occasions at Bree came to Tom's ears, he sent them to Mr. Butterbur, who for that reason were given the appropriate beasts at a very honest rate. They needed to paintings tougher in Bree, however Bob handled them well, so at the complete they have been fortunate. They ignored a dark and perilous adventure. However, they never got here to Rivendell. However, inside in the meantime, for all Mr. Butterbur knew, his cash changed into gone for top, or for awful. And he had different problems. For there changed into a splendid commotion as quickly because the closing visitors were astir, and heard information of the raid on the hotel. The southern guests had misplaced several horses and blamed the innkeeper loudly, until it have become acknowledged that considered one of their own wide variety had also disappeared within the night time, none aside from Bill Fernie's squint-eyed accomplice. Suspicion fell on him at once. In case you pick up with a horse thief, and bring him to my house, said Butterbur angrily, you must pay for all the damage yourselves and not come shouting at me. Move and ask Fernie wherein your handsome friend is. But it appeared that he changed into nobody's buddy, and no person should. Don't forget, while he had joined their celebration, after their breakfast the hobbits needed to repeat and get together. Similarly, substances for the longer adventure they had been now watching for. It became close on 10 o'clock before they remaining were given off. By that time the whole of Bree was buzzing with excitement. Frodo's vanishing trick, the arrival of the Black Horseman, the robbing of the stables, and now not least the information that Strider the Ranger had joined the mysterious Hobbits, made this kind of story as might last for many uneventful years. Most of the inhabitants of Bree and Staddle, and lots of even from Coombe and Arquette, have been crowded in the road to see the visitors start. The other guests inside the hotel have been on the doorways or placing out of the windows. Strider had changed his thoughts, and had determined to depart Bree by using the principal street. Any try to set off throughout us of a right now might only make matters worse. Half of the population would observe them, to see what they were up to, and to save you them from trespassing. They said farewell to Nob and Bob, and took depart of Mr. Butterbur with many thank you. I am hoping we shall meet once more some day, while things are merry once more, stated Frodo. I ought to like not anything higher than to stay in your property in peace for some time. They tramped off, annoying and downhearted, underneath the eyes of the crowd. Now not all the faces have been pleasant, nor all of the phrases that had been shouted. But Strider regarded to be held in awe with the aid of most of the Breelanders, and those that he stared at closed their mouths and drew away. He walked in front with Frodo, subsequent got here Merry and Pippin, and final came Sam Main the horse, which was weighted down with as a good deal in their luggage as that they had the heart to give it, but already it seemed less dejected, as though it authorized of the alternate in its fortunes. Sam become chewing an apple thoughtfully. He had a pocket full of them, a parting gift from Nob and Bob. Apples for on foot, and a pipe for sitting, he said. But I reckon I'll leave out them both before lengthy. The hobbits took no note of the inquisitive heads that peeped outside, or popped over walls and fences, as they passed. But as they drew close to the in-addition gate, Frodo saw a darkish unwell-kept residence behind a thick hedge, the final house in the village. In one of the home windows he stuck a glimpse of a sallow face with sly, slanting eyes, but it vanished straight away. In order that's where that southerner is hiding, he thought. He appears extra than half of like a goblin. Over the hedge some other guy became staring boldly. He had heavy black brows, and dark scornful eyes, his big mouth curled in a sneer. He was smoking a brief black pipe. As they approached he took it out of his mouth and spat. "Morning, Longshanks," he said. Off early observed some friends at closing. Strider nodded, but did no longer solution. "Morning, my little friends," he said to the others. "I assume you recognize who you've taken up with that stick at not Strider, that is, even though I've heard different names now not so quite watch out tonight, and you, Sammy, don't go unwell treating my poor old pony." "Pa!" he spat again. Sam turned quickly. "And you, Fernie," he said, "positioned your unpleasant face out of sight, or it will get hurt." With the unexpected ick, brief as lightning, an apple left his hand and hit Bill rectangular on the nose. He ducked. 2 past due, and curses came from in the back of the hedge. "Waste of an amazing apple," said Sam regretfully, and strode on. At remaining they left the village behind. The escort of children and stragglers that had followed them got tired and grew to become back on the south gate. Passing via, they saved on along the road for a few miles. It bent to the left, curving back into its eastward line as it rounded the toes of Bree Hill, and then it began to run unexpectedly downwards into wooded United States of America. To their left they may see some of the Homes and hobbit holes of Staddle at the gentler southeastern slopes of the hill, down in a deep hole away north of the street. There were wisps of growing smoke that confirmed in which Coombe lay, Arquette changed into hidden within the timber past. After the road had run down some way, and had left Bree Hill. Standing tall and brown at the back of, they came on a slender song that led off towards the north. "This is in which we go away the open and take to cover," stated Strider. "No longer a short reduce, I am hoping," said Pippin. "Our remaining brief reduce through woods almost led to catastrophe." "Ah, however you had not were given me with then you," laughed Strider. "My cuts, brief or lengthy, don't pass incorrect." He took a glance up and down the road. Nobody become in sight, and he led the way fast down, closer to the wooded valley. His plan, as far as they could apprehend it without knowing the country, was to head closer to Arquette at Rst, however to undergo proper and bypass it at the east, and then to influence as straight as he should over the wild lands to Weathertop Hill. In that manner they could, if all went well, cut off a outstanding loop of the road, which further on bent southwards, to avoid the Midgewater marshes. However, of route, they could have to skip via the marshes themselves, and Strider's description of them become now not encouraging. But, inside the meanwhile, taking walks become not ugly. Certainly, if it had now not been for the traumatic occasions of the night time earlier then, they would have enjoyed this a part of the journey better than any as much as that point. The sun become shining, clean but no longer too hot. The woods in the valley were nonetheless leafy and full of coloration, and appeared non-violent and healthy. Strider guided them contently the various many crossing paths, even though left to themselves they might soon have been at a loss. He changed into taking a wandering direction with many turns and doublings, to take away any pursuit. "Invoice Fernie may have watched in which we left the street, for sure," he stated, "although I don't assume he's going to comply with us himself. He is aware of the land spherical here properly enough, but he is aware of he isn't in shape for me in a wood. It's miles what he may tell others that I'm terrified of. I don't suppose they are far away. If they suppose we've made for Arquette, a lot the higher. Whether because of Strider's talent or for some different cause, they noticed no signal and heard no sound of another residing aspect all that day. Neither two-footed, besides birds, nor four-footed, except one fox and a few squirrels. Day after day they began to influence a consistent direction eastwards, and nonetheless all turned into quiet and non-violent. At the third time out from Bree they got here out of the Chetwood. The land have been falling steadily, ever when you consider that they grew to become other than the street, and they now entered a wide expanse of us of a lots more difficult to manipulate. They were some distance past the borders of the Bree land, out in the pathless desert, and drawing near to the Midgewater marshes. The floor now became damp, and in locations boggy, and right here and there they got here upon swimming pools, and extensive stretches of reeds and rushes. LED with the warbling of little hidden birds. They needed to pick their manner carefully to maintain both dry-footed and on their proper path. At Rst they made honest progress, however as they went on, their passage have become slower and extra dangerous. The marshes had been bewildering and treacherous, and there was no everlasting path even for rangers to end through their shifting quagmires. The ice started out to torment them, and the air turned into complete of clouds of tiny midges that crept up there sleeves and breeches and into their hair. I'm being eaten alive!" cried Pippin. "Midge water! There are greater midges than water. What do they live on when they could get Hobbit?" requested Sam, scratching his neck. They spent a miserable day on this lonely and unsightly United States of America. Their camping area was damp, cold, and uncomfortable, and the biting bugs would not let them sleep. There had been also abominable creatures haunting the reeds and tussocks that from the sound of them had been evil spouse and children of the cricket. There were lots of them, and they squeaked all round, neek breek, breek neek, unceasingly all the night, until the hobbits have been nearly frantic. The following day, the 4th, was little better, and the night time almost as comfortless. Even though the neeker-breakers, as Sam called them, were left at the back of, the midges nevertheless pursued them. As Frodo lay, worn out but not able to shut his eyes, it appeared to him that a long way away there got here a mild in the Jap sky, it ashed and faded oftentimes. It become not the sunrise, for that turned into nevertheless a few hours off. "What is the mild?" he stated to Strider, who had risen, and changed into status, staring at ahead into the night time. "I do no longer realize," Strider responded. "It is too distant to make out. It's far like lightning that leaps up from the hilltops." Frodo lay down once more, however for an extended whilst he ought to nevertheless see the white ashes, and in opposition to them the tall darkish gur of Strider, status. Silent and watchful. At remaining he acceded into uneasy sleep. They'd not long passed a long way on the FTH day when they left the remaining straggling swimming pools and reed beds of the marshes behind them. The land, earlier than them, commenced gradually to upward thrust again. Away in the distance eastward they could now see a line of hills. The best of them became at the proper of the line and a touch separated from the others. It had a conical top, slightly attoned at the summit. "This is Weathertop," stated Strider. "The old street, which we have left far away on our proper, runs to the south of it and passes not far from its foot. We might reach it by noon the next day, if we pass directly toward it. I think we had higher do so." "What do you mean?" asked Frodo. "I imply, when we do get there, it is not sure what we shall end. It's far near the road. However, truly we had been hoping to end Gandalf there." "Yes, but the wish is faint. If he comes this manner in any respect, he might not bypass via Bree, and so he won't recognize what we're doing. And anyway, until by luck we arrive almost together, we shall miss one another. It'll now not be secure for him or for us to wait there long. If the riders fail to end us within the desolate tract, they're likely to make for Weathertop themselves. It commands a wide view, all spherical. Certainly, there are many birds and beasts in this U.S. A. that could see us, as we stand right here, from that hill pinnacle. Now not all the birds are to be relied on, and there are different spies extra evil than they may be." The hobbits appeared anxiously on the distant hills. Sam looked up into the pale sky, fearing to peer hawks or eagles hovering over them. With vivid unfriendly eyes, "You do make me experience uncomfortable and lonesome, Strider," he stated. "What do you endorse us to do?" asked Frodo. "I think," responded Strider slowly, as though he was no longer pretty positive, "I think the first-class aspect is to move as straight eastward from here as we can, to make for the road of hills, not for Weathertop. There we will strike a path I recognize that runs at their feet. It's going to carry us to Weathertop from the north and less openly. Then we will see what we shall see." All that day they plodded along, till the cold and early evening came down. The land have become drier and more barren, but mists and vapors lay at the back of them on the marshes. Some despair birds had been piping and wailing, till the round pink solar sank slowly into the western shadows, then an empty silence fell. The Hobbit's notion of the soft mild of sunset glancing through the cheerful windows of Bag End a ways away. At the day's quit they got here to a flow that wandered down from the hills to lose itself inside the stagnant marshland, and that they went up alongside its banks while the light lasted. It was already night time whilst it final they halted and made their camp under some stunted alder timber. Through the shorelines of the circulation in advance there loomed now against the dusky sky the bleak and treeless backs of the hills. That night they set an eye fixed, and Strider, it appeared, did not sleep in any respect. The moon changed into waxing, and within the early night hours a cold grey mild lay on the land. Next morning they set out once more quickly after sunrise. There has been a frost inside the air, and the sky become a pale clean blue. The hobbits felt refreshed, as if they had had a night time of unbroken sleep. Already they were being used to a whole lot strolling on brief commons shorter at any charge than what in the Shire they might have notion slightly enough to keep them on their legs. Pippin declared that Frodo turned into looking 2 times the hobbit that he were. Very odd, stated Frodo, tightening his belt. Thinking about that, there is sincerely a bargain less of me. I am hoping the thinning system will not cross on indefinitely, or I shall end up a wraith. Do now not talk of such things, said Strider Speedy, and with surprising earnestness. The hills drew closer. They made an undulating ridge, often growing nearly to 1,000 feet, and here and there falling once more to low clefts or passes leading into the eastern land past. Alongside the crest of the ridge the hobbits may want to see what appeared to be the remains of inexperienced grown walls and dikes, and within the clefts there nonetheless stood the ruins of antique works of stone. Via night they'd reached the foot of the westward slopes, and there they camped. It became the night of the FTH of October, and they had been 6 days out from Bree. Within the morning they located, for the RST time for the reason that they had left the Chetwood, a song simple to look. They grew to become proper and accompanied it southwards. It ran cunningly, taking a line that seemed selected so as to maintain as an awful lot hidden as viable from the view, each of the hilltops above and of the its to the west. It dived into dells, and hugged steep banks, and wherein it surpassed overiter and greater open floor on either side of it there had been lines of big boulders and hewn stones that screened the visitors nearly like a hedge. I ponder who made this direction, and what for, stated Mary, as they walked alongside any such avenues, where the stones were unusually large and closely set. I am not positive that I love it. It has a properly, as an alternative, a barrow whitish appearance. Is there any barrow on Weathertop? No, there's no barrow on Weathertop, nor on any of these hills, answered Strider. The men of the West did no longer stay here, although in their latter days they defended the hills for a while in opposition to the evil that got here out of Angmar. This course was made to serve the forts along the partitions. But lengthy earlier than, inside the RST days of the North State, they built a extraordinary watchtower on Weathertop, Amansuel they called it. It became burned and damaged, and not anything remains of it now but a tumbled ring, like a rough crown at the old hill's head. But as soon as it turned into tall and honest, it's far told that Elendil stood there watching for the approaching of Gilgalad out of the west, in the days of the remaining alliance. The hobbits gazed at Strider. It regarded that he changed into found out in vintage lore, in addition to within the approaches of the wild. Who became Gil-galad asked. Merry, but Strider did no longer answer, and seemed to be misplaced in concept. Suddenly a low voice murmured. Gil-galad changed into an elven king. Of him the harpers regrettably sing. The remaining whose realm turned into honest and free. Among the mountains and the sea. His sword became lengthy, his lance become keen, his shining helm afar changed into visible, the infinite stars of heaven's eld. Have been mirrored in his silver shield. However long ago he rode away, and wherein he dwelleth none can say, for into darkness fell his celebrity. In Mordor where the shadows are. The others grew to become in amazement, for the voice become Sam's don't prevent. Said Merry. That's all I realize, stammered Sam, blushing. I learned it from Mr. Bilbo while I was a lad. He used to tell me tales like that, understanding how I used to be continually one for listening to approximately elves. It turned into Mr. Bilbo as taught me my letters. He changed into strong book found out became dear antique. Mr. Bilbo. And he wrote poetry. He wrote what I've simply stated. He did not make it up, said Strider. It's far a part of the lay. This is referred to as the Autumn of Gil-galad, that's in an historic tongue. Bilbo ought to have translated it. I in no way knew that. There has been loads greater, said Sam, all about Mordor. I didn't learn that part, it gave me the shivers. I in no way thought I need to be going that way myself. Going to Mordor? Cried Pippin. I hope it gained come to that. Do no longer speak that calls so loudly, said Strider. It become already midday once they drew close to the southern seas of the direction, and noticed earlier than them, in the pale clean light of the October solar, a grey inexperienced financial institution, leading up like a bridge directly to the northward slope of the hill. They decided to make for the pinnacle immediately, at the same time as the daylight changed into huge concealment changed into now not possible, and that they may want to best wish that no enemy or secret agent was gazing them. Not anything changed into to be visible transferring on the hill. If Gandalf become everywhere about, there was no signal of him. On the western ank of Weathertop they determined a sheltered hole, at the lowest of which there has been a bowl-formed dell with grassy sides. There they left Sam and Pippin with the horse and their packs and bags. The alternative three went on. After half of an hour's plodding climb, Strider reached the crown of the hill, Frodo and Merry accompanied, worn out and breathless. The remaining slope had been steep and rocky. On the top they discovered, as Strider had said, a huge ring of ancient stone paintings, now crumbling or included with age-lengthy grass. However, in the center a cairn of damaged stones have been piled. They had been blackened as though with about them the turf became burned to the roots, and all in the ring the grass turned into scorched and shriveled, as if ams had swept the hilltop, but there has been no signal of any residing factor. Standing upon the rim of the ruined circle, they noticed all spherical. Under them a huge prospect, for the most part of lands empty and featureless, except for patches of wooded area away to the south, beyond which they stuck right here and there the glint of remote water. Beneath them on this southern side there ran like a ribbon the vintage road, coming out of the west and winding up and down, until it dwindled at the back of a ridge of dark land to the east. Not anything changed into shifting on it. Following its line eastward with their eyes they saw the mountains. The nearer foothills were brown and somber, at the back of them stood taller shapes of grey, and at the back of those once more have been excessive white peaks glimmering among the clouds. "Nicely, here we're," said Mary. "And really cheerless and uninviting it seems. There is no water and no refuge. And no signal of Gandalf. But I don't blame him for no longer waiting if he ever came here." "I ponder," said Strider, looking spherical thoughtfully. "Although he became an afternoon or two at the back of us at Bree, he ought to have arrived right here RST. He can ride very unexpectedly while need presses." He stooped and checked out the stone on the pinnacle of the cairn. It was lighter than the others, and whiter, as though it had escaped the Ree. He picked it up and tested it, turning it in his engers. "This has been dealt with these days," he stated. "What do you believe you studied of those marks on the underneath facet?" Frodo noticed some scratches. "There seems to be a stroke, a dot, and 3 extra strokes," he stated. "The stroke at the left is probably a jiroon with thin branches," stated Strider. "It is probably a signal left with the aid of Gandalf, even though one can't be sure. The scratches are any, and they sincerely appearance fresh. But the marks might imply something quite different, and have nothing to do with us. Rangers use runes, and they come here once in a while. What should they imply, even supposing Gandalf made them?" requested Mary. "I must say," replied Strider, "that they stood for G3, and were a signal that Gandalf changed into here on October the 0.33, this is 3 days ago now. It would also show that he turned into in a rush and chance became at hand, so that he had no time or did not dare to put in writing something longer or plainer. If that is so, we need to be cautious. I wish we should experience positive that he made the marks, whatever they may additionally mean," said Frodo. "It'd be a fantastic comfort to know that he became at the way, in front of us or at the back of us." "Perhaps," said Strider. "For myself, I trust that he turned into here, and turned into in Hazard. There had been scorching ams right here, and now the mild that we saw 3 nights in the past within the Jap sky comes lower back. To my mind, I bet that he changed into attacked on this hill pinnacle, however with what end result I can't tell. He's right here no longer, and we ought to now appearance after ourselves and make our personal way to Rivendell, as great we can." "How some distance is Rivendell?" requested Mary, looking at round wearily. "They international regarded wild and wide from Weathertop. I don't understand if the street has ever been measured in miles beyond the Forsaken Motel, an afternoon's journey east of Bree," spoke back Strider. "Some say it is so a ways, and some say otherwise. It's far a peculiar street, and folks are satisfied to attain their journey's end, whether or not the time is long or quick. However, I understand how long it might take me on my own toes, with honest climate and no sick fortune, 12 days from here to the fort of Bruinen, in which the road crosses the loud water that runs out of Rivendell. We've as a minimum a fortnight's journey earlier than us, for I do not suppose we shall be capable of use the street." "A fortnight," said Frodo. "A lot may additionally occur in that point." "It could," stated Strider. They stood for a while silent at the hilltop, close to its southward aspect. In that lonely place Frodo for the rst time completely realized his homelessness and danger. He wished bitterly that his fortune had left him inside the quiet and beloved Shire. He stared down at the hateful street, Main again westward to his domestic. He became aware that 2 black specks were shifting slowly along it, going westward, and searching once more he noticed that 3 others had been creeping eastward. To fulfill them. He gave a cry and clutched Strider's arm. Look, he stated, pointing downwards. Straight away Strider hung himself on the floor in the back of the ruined circle, pulling Frodo down beside him. Merry threw himself along. What's it? He whispered. I do not recognize, but I worry the worst, replied Strider. Slowly they crawled as much as the edge of the hoop once more, and peered through a cleft among two jagged stones. The mild was no longer vibrant, for the clear morning had faded, and clouds creeping out of the east had now overtaken the solar, because it started out to move down. They ought to all see the black specks, but neither Frodo nor Merry may want to make out their shapes for certain, but something told them that there, some distance under, had been black riders assembling on the street past the foot of the hill. Yes, stated Strider, whose keener sight left him in absolute confidence. The enemy is here. Swiftly they crept away and slipped down the north aspect of the hill to endy their partners. Sam and Peregrine had not been idle. They'd explored the small dell and the encompassing slopes. Not a long way away they located a spring of clear water within the hillside, and close to it footprints now not extra than a day or two old. Inside the dell itself they located recent lines of a and different symptoms of a hasty camp. There were some fallen rocks on the brink of the dell nearest to the hill. At the back of them Sam came upon a small save of rewood smartly stacked. I'm wondering if antique Gandalf has been right here, he stated to Pippin. Whoever it was positioned this stuff right here intended to come lower back, it appears. Strider changed into substantially inquisitive about these discoveries. I desire I had waited and explored the floor down here myself, he stated, hurrying off to the spring to study the footprints. It is just as I feared, he said, while he got here back. Sam and Pippin have trampled the tender ground, and the marks are spoilt or harassed. Rangers were here currently. It's miles they who left the rewood behind. But there also are several newer tracks that had been not made via rangers. At the least one set was made, most effective a day or ago, with the aid of heavy boots. At least one. I cannot now be certain, but I assume there were many booted foot. He paused and stood in stressful idea. Each of the hobbits noticed in his thoughts a vision of the cloaked and booted riders. If the horsemen had already observed the dell, the earlier Strider led them some other place the higher. Sam regarded the whole with amazing dislike, now that he had heard news of their enemies on the road, only a few miles away. Hadn't we better clean out brief, Mr. Strider, he asked impatiently. It is getting overdue, and that I don't like this hollow, it makes my heart sink by some means. Sure, we simply should determine what to do without delay, replied Strider, searching up and thinking about the time and the climate. Properly, Sam, he said at last, I do now not like this place both, however I cannot consider everywhere higher that we could attain before dusk. At the least, we are out of sight for the moment, and if we moved we need to be more likely to be visible by spies. All we may want to do could be to go proper out of our way again north in this aspect of the road of hills, where the land is all a lot the same as its miles right here. The street is watched, however we must move it, if we tried to take cowl in the thickets. Away to the south, on the north aspect of the street past the hills, the Usava is naked and at 4 miles. Can the riders see, requested Merry. I suggest, they seem normally to have used their noses as opposed to their eyes, smelling for us, if smelling is the right phrase, at least in the sunlight hours however you made us lie down at whilst you noticed them down below, and now you communicate of being seen, if we flow. I used to be too careless on the hilltop, spoke back Strider. I used to be very anxious to ente a few sign of Gandalf, however it become a mistake for 3 people to go up and stand there so long. For the black horses can see, and the riders can use guys and other creatures as spies, as we located at Bree. They themselves do now not see the world of light as we do, but our shapes forged shadows in their minds, which simplest the noon solar destroys, and inside the darkish they understand many signs and forms that are hidden from us, then they're most to be feared. And at all times they odor the blood of residing things, wanting and hating it. Senses, too, there are other than sight or odor. We can experience their presence. It bothered our hearts, as quickly as we came here, and earlier than we saw them, they feel ours extra keenly. Additionally, he introduced, and his voice sank to a whisper, the ring draws them. Is there no escape then, stated Frodo, searching round wildly. If I circulate I will be seen and hunted. If I live, I shall draw them to me. Strider laid his hand on his shoulder. There may be none the less hope, he stated. You are not by myself. Allow us to take this timber that is set equipped for the Ree as a signal. There is little safe haven or defense here, however Ree shall serve for each. Sauron can put Ree to his evil uses, as he can all matters, however those riders do no longer adore it, and worry those who wield it. Fireplaces are buddy inside the desolate tract. Perhaps, muttered Sam. It's also as precise a manner of saying right here we are as I can think about, bar shouting. Down within the lowest and maximum sheltered corner of the dell they lit a Ree, and organized a meal. The shades of night started out to fall, and it grew cold. They were all at once privy to incredible starvation, for they had not eaten whatever considering the fact that breakfast, but they dared not make extra. Then a frugal supper. The lands in advance had been empty of all keep birds and beasts, unfriendly locations deserted by way of all the races of the world. Rangers exceeded at instances past the hills, however they had been few and did now not live. Other wanderers were rare, and of evil sort. Trolls would possibly stray down at instances out of the northern valleys of the misty mountains. Best on the road might travelers be observed, most customarily dwarves, hurrying along on enterprise of their very own, and without a help and few words to spare for strangers. I don't see how our meals can be made to ultimate, said Frodo. We had been careful sufficient within the previous few days, and this supper isn't any feast, however we have used extra than we ought, if we've weeks nonetheless to go, and perhaps more. There may be food in the wild, said Strider, berry, root, and herb, and I've a few skill as a hunter at want. You need no longer be afraid of ravenous before winter comes. But collecting and catching food is lengthy and weary work, and we need haste. So tighten your belts, and assume with hope of the tables of Elrond's house. The cold accelerated as darkness came on. Peering out from the fringe of the dell they may see nothing but a grey land now vanishing quick into shadow. The sky above had cleared once more and changed into slowly LED with twinkling stars. Frodo and his partners huddled spherical. The Ree, wrapped in each garment and blanket they possessed, but Strider changed into content with the unmarried cloak, and sat a little aside, drawing thoughtfully at his pipe. As night time fell and the light of the Ree commenced to polish out brightly, he began to tell them testimonies to hold their minds from fear. He knew many histories and legends of lengthy ago, of elves and guys and they top and evil deeds of the elder days. They wondered how vintage he was, and wherein he had discovered all this lore. "Inform us of Gilgalad," said Merry unexpectedly, while he paused at the give-up of a story of the elf kingdoms. "Do you understand any extra of that vintage lay that you spoke of?" "I do certainly," answered Strider. "So also does Frodo, for it worries us carefully." Merry and Pippin checked out Frodo, who became staring into the re. "I recognize best the little that Gandalf has informed me," stated Frodo slowly. "Gilgalad became the final of the fantastic elf kings of Center-Earth. Gilgalad is starlight of their tongue. With Elendil, the elf pal, he went to the land of—" "No," stated Strider interrupting, "I do now not assume that story must be told now with the servants of the enemy to hand. If we win via to the residence of Elrond, you could hear it there, told in full." "Then tell us a few other tale of the vintage days," begged Sam. "A tale approximately the elves before the fading time. I'd dearly want to listen. Greater approximately elves, the dark appears to press spherical so close." "I'm able to inform you the story of Tynuviel," said Strider, in quick, for it is a protracted story of which the cease is not recognized, and there are none now, except Elrond, that recall it aright because it become advised of old. It's far a truthful tale, even though it is sad, as are all of the memories of Middle-earth, and yet it may carry up your hearts." He became silent for some time, and then he began no longer to talk, however, to chant softly. The leaves were lengthy, the grass became inexperienced, the hemlock umbles tall and truthful, and in the glade a mild changed into visible of stars in shadow shimmering. Tynuviel was dancing there, to tune of a pipe unseen, and mild of stars became in her hair, and in her raiment glimmering. There Burin came from mountains cold, and lost he wandered underneath leaves, and in which the elven river rolled. He walked on my own and sorrowing. He peered among the hemlock leaves, and saw in surprise hours of gold upon her mantle and her sleeves, and her hair like shadow following. Enchantment healed his weary foot, that over hills were doomed to roam, and forth he hastened, strong and eat, and grasped at moonbeams glistening, through woven woods and elven home. She lightly ed on dancing foot, and left him lonely nevertheless to roam within the silent wooded area listening. He heard there oft the ying sound of foot as mild as linden leaves, or music welling underground, in hidden hollows quavering. Now withered lay the hemlock sheaves, and one by one with sighing sound whispering fell the beechen leaves. In the wintry woodland wavering, he sought her ever, wandering a long way, wherein leaves of years have been thickly strewn, by mild of moon and ray of celebrity. In frosty heavens shivering, her mantle glinted inside the moon, as on a hilltop high and far. She danced, and at her toes was strewn a mist of silver quivering. Whilst wintry weather exceeded, she came again, and her song launched the sudden spring, like rising lark, and falling rain, and melting water bubbling. He noticed the elven hours spring about her foot, and healed again. He longed with the aid of her to bounce and sing upon the grass untroubling. Once more she ed, however quick he got here. Tynuviel. Tynuviel. He known as her by using her elvish name, and there she halted listening. One moment stood she, and a spell his voice laid on her. Burin got here, and doom fell on Tynuviel, that in his palms lay glistening. As Burin regarded into her eyes, inside the shadows of her hair, the trembling starlight of the skies, he noticed their reflected shimmering. Tynuviel the elven honest, immortal maiden elven sensible, approximately him solid her shadowy hair, and fingers like silver glimmering. long become the manner that destiny them bore, o'er stony mountains bloodless and grey, via halls of iron and darkling door, and woods of nightshade moraless. The sundering seas among them lay, and but at remaining they met once more, and long in the past they surpassed away. Within the wooded area singing sorrowless. Strider sighed and paused before he spoke again. That could be a tune, he said, within the mode this is referred to as an the nath the various elves, but is difficult to render in our not unusual speech, and that is however a hard echo of it. It tells of the meeting of Burin son of Barahir and Elutyen. Tinuvil. Burin became a mortal guy, but Elutyen was the daughter of Thingol, a king of elves upon Middle-earth whilst the world changed into young, and she changed into the fairest maiden that has ever been amongst all the youngsters of this world. Because the stars above the mists of the northern lands become her loveliness, and in her face changed into a shining light. In those days the super-enemy, of whom Sauron of Mordor turned into but a servant, dwelled in Angband in the north, and the elves of the west coming lower back to Middle-earth made conflict upon him to regain the Silmarils, which he had stolen, and the fathers of men aided the elves. But the enemy was triumphant and Barahir was slain, and Burin escaping through superb peril came over the mountains of terror into the hidden state of Thingol inside the woodland of Neldoreth. There he beheld Elutyen singing and dancing in a glade beside the enchanted river Escalduin, and he named her Tinuvil, that is nightingale in the language of Antique. Many sorrows befell them afterwards, and they have been parted long. Tinuvil rescued Burin from the dungeons of Sauron, and collectively they exceeded through tremendous risks, and forged down even the exquisite enemy from his throne, and took from his iron crown one of the 3 Silmarils, brightest of all jewels, to be the bride fee of Elutyen to Thingol her father. But on the ultimate Burin changed into slain with the aid of the wolf that got here from the gates of Angband, and he died within the palms of Tinuvil. However she selected mortality, and to die from the world, in order that she would possibly comply with him, and it is sung that they met once more past the sundering seas, and after a short time taking walks alive yet again in the inexperienced woods, together they handed, long ago, past the knees of this global. So it is that Elutyen Tinuvil on my own of the elf kindred has died certainly and left the world, and they have misplaced her whom they maximum cherished. However from her the lineage of the elf lords of Antique descended amongst men. There stay nonetheless those of whom Elutyen became the foremother, and it is said that her line shall by no means fail. Elrond of Rivendell is of that kinfolk. For of Burin and Elutyen turned into born Dior Thingol's inheritor, and of him Elwing the White whom Earendil wedded, he that sailed his ship out of the mists of the world into the seas of heaven with the Silmaril upon his forehead. And of Earendil came the kings of Numenor, this is Western S. As Strider turned into talking they watched his odd eager face, dimly lit in the red glow of the timber. His eyes shone, and his voice was rich and deep. Above him turned into a black starry sky. A pale mild appeared over the crown of Weathertop at the back of him. The waxing moon turned into mountain climbing slowly above the hill that overshadowed them, and the celebs above the hill pinnacle diminished. The story ended. The hobbits moved and stretched. Appearance, said Mary. The moon is growing, it have to be getting past due. The others seemed up. Even as they did so, they noticed on the top Of the hill something small and darkish in opposition to the glimmer of the moonrise. It become possibly handiest a large stone or jutting rock shown up by using the faded light. Sam and Merry got up and walked far from the Ree. Frodo and Pippin remained seated in silence. Strider became watching the moonlight on the hill closely. All regarded quiet and still, but Frodo felt a bloodless dread creeping over his heart, now that Strider became not talking. He huddled toward the Ree. At that moment Sam got here. Walking again from the brink of the dell. "I don't recognize what it is," he stated, "however I all at once felt afraid. I durstn't cross outdoor this dell for any money. I felt that something turned into creeping up the slope." "Did you see something?" requested Frodo, springing to his foot. "No, sir. I saw nothing, however I didn't stop to appearance." "I noticed something," said Merry, "or I notion I did away westwards where the moonlight was falling on the it's beyond the shadow of the hilltops. I concept there had been or three black shapes. They seemed to be transferring this manner. Keep close to the Ree, along with your faces outward," cried Strider. "Get some of the longer sticks equipped on your hands." For a breathless time they sat there, silent and alert, with their backs became to the wooden Ree, every watching into the shadows that encircled them. Not anything happened. There has been no sound or movement inside the night time. Frodo stirred, feeling that he must spoil the silence. He longed to shout out aloud. "Hush!" whispered Strider. "What's that?" gasped Pippin at the same moment. Over the lip of the little dell, at the facet far from the hill, they felt, in place of noticed, a shadow upward push, one shadow or multiple. They strained their eyes, and the shadows appeared to grow. Soon, there can be no question, 3 or 4 tall blackguards had been standing there at the slope, looking down on them. So black have been they that they regarded like black holes within the deep shade behind them. Frodo idea that he heard a faint hiss as of venomous breath and felt a skinny piercing kick back. Then the shapes slowly superior. Terror overcame Pippin and Merry, and that they threw themselves on the ground. Sam shrank to Frodo's facet. Frodo became infrequently much less terried than his partners. He changed into quaking as if he was bitter cold, but his terror was swallowed up in a surprising temptation to position on the ring. The desire to try this laid hold of him, and he could think about not anything else. He did not forget the barrow, nor the message of Gandalf, however something seemed to be compelling him to disregard all warnings, and he longed to yield. Now not with the desire of breakout, or of doing something, either desirable or bad, he clearly felt that he need to take the hoop and put it on his enger. He could not talk. He felt Sam searching at him, as if he knew that his master became in a few first-rate hassle, but he couldn't turn closer to him. He closed his eyes and struggled for a while, however resistance became insufferable, and at ultimate, he slowly drew out the chain, and slipped the hoop at the pharenger of his left hand. Without delay, even though the whole lot else remained as before, dim and dark, the shapes have become extraordinarily clean. He turned into capable of see below their black wrappings. There have been Tolkers, status on the lip of the dell, 3 advancing. Of their white faces burned eager and merciless eyes, below their mantles had been long grey gowns, upon their grey hairs have been helms of silver, in their haggard arms were swords of steel. Their eyes fell on him and pierced him, as they rushed in the direction of him. Determined, he drew his own sword, and it regarded to him that it ickered crimson, as if it changed into a rebrand of the gers. Halted. The third turned into taller than the others, his hair changed into long and glowing, and on his helm changed into a crown. In one hand he held an extended sword, and in the other a knife, both the knife and the hand that held it glowed with a faded mild. He sprang forward and bore down on Frodo. At that second Frodo threw himself ahead at the ground, and he heard himself crying aloud, "O Elbereth! Gildhoniel!" At the same time he struck at the toes of his enemy. A shrill cry rang out within the night time, and he felt a pain like a dart of poisoned ice pierce his left shoulder. Even as he swooned he caught, as through a swirling mist, a glimpse of Strider jumping out of the darkness with Éaming brand of wood in either hand. With the ultimate effort Frodo, dropping his sword, slipped the ring from his enger and closed his right hand tight upon it.